quick note before we get started. This episode was recorded the same day as the story broke about Kristi Noem killing her dog, so some of our discussion about Trump's running mate picks is a bit out of date. Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is John Kimball. John, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is John Kimball. I'm a podcaster. I'm a co-host of the podcast Election Profit Makers with my friend David Rees, and I live in North Carolina. Thanks for having me, Aryeh.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I've been listening to you for over 4 years at this point on your podcast, and a big fan of the podcast. And I had David Rees on a couple years ago as well. So people should check out Election Profit Makers, which is a very entertaining and informative podcast that was originally about winning and losing. Well,
Okay.
why don't you describe the podcast has sort of changed over time and goes down various interesting cul-de-sacs, but how would you describe the podcast?
Well, I guess the way we describe it is that it's a podcast about winning and losing money on, political prediction markets. But yes, as you say, over time, it's become less about that, and sometimes we just veer into more esoteric topics like fish weirs or skylines or GeoGuessr or just general cultural issues. So
Right. So people, I'll include the link for if people want to listen to my conversation with David Rees, which I think was from 2022. And so the podcast was originally centered around predictit.org, one of the like online sort of gambling, prediction marketplaces. But that site has become semi-defunct, and you can still bet on some categories of political outcomes, but they stopped creating new ones. Is that right?
that is correct. Yeah, I mean there were a number of lawsuits going on, and then yesterday the latest news was that the CFTC is coming out and they may just try to ban all of these, altogether and completely get rid of these type of markets. So we'll see. We'll see
Oh,
what will
that would
happen.
be a shame. I mean, I get they do have. I guess they long operated in sort of a quasi gray area of the law where essentially they had some like academic association, but people were placing actual bets and making real money. And you yourself made like around $10,000 in the 2020 election by smartly playing various like categories. But so it used to be that they would like create like one for each state, every primary, every possible race, and you could bet all of them and also like bet no in certain things and
Absolutely.
hedge your bets in all sorts of like creative ways. But now it's much more limited.
No, I mean there's about, I don't even know how many markets there are, 12 markets maybe total. I think I'm in a couple at the moment, and I've got, I think I have less than $1,000 in there. Whereas, yeah, in 2016 and in 2020, I had, 10, not tens of thousands, but yeah, it was getting over 10,000. Especially in 2020, because after the election was over, all of these markets continued to. I mean, it was clear that Biden was going to win, but all of the Trump supporters were absolutely convinced that something big was going to happen. And I guess in that sense, they were right that the January 6th did happen. And it just didn't result in Trump becoming president. So
Right.
I ended up, after that election ended, I was just like, oh, you need to put all your money. It just is, because this is just free money at this point. All the everything was trading at 80% likely when it was 99.9% likely that Biden would win. So
Right. So something that, usually what happens on this site is that as soon as the election is called by the AP, the price immediately goes to either like 99 or 1, where
right.
everyone gets out. And so that means even if they haven't officially like closed it or something by the site and paid out, like it's clear that it's like the horse has like fallen down in the middle of the race and is clearly not gonna win if this were a racetrack or
Yes.
something. But then because of the insanity of Trump, contesting the election, claiming he didn't win, all these Trump diehards stayed in the market, and that made like more or less like free money. Where if people, if you could clearly Biden was going to win, especially like state by state, but you could make like a 20% return by taking the money out of the hands of these foolish or deranged Trump supporters who were like holding out hope that he would eventually be declared the winner.
Right. And they were completely foolish in 2020, but in 2016, you know, we thought they were foolish, and although I made a decent amount of money in 2016 leading up to the election, when election night happened, lost thousands of dollars. So yes, I was able to probably break even over the course of those 4 years.
Okay, well that's that's good to hear. But
Yeah.
anyway, the podcast itself is a lot less now about investing, winning and losing money and riding waves in prediction markets, because the prediction market world for Americans has shrunk a lot, and now it's more just talking about politics and other interesting arcana that you and David get into. But I guess I would ask, are you putting money on Biden currently? What are you
I'm
thinking?
not. I don't have any. I mean, one of the things that I sort of learned over the years was there's no rush to get into these markets. I mean, Biden right now, I think, is trading at 53 cents, and every share trades anywhere between 1 cent and $1, 99 cents, and pays out at $1 if he becomes the nominee or becomes president, and zero if he doesn't. But I think it's going to remain there, heading into the election. I think on election night, it's still going to be 50-50. So there's no need to jump in right now. I think the VP markets are sort of fun because they keep adding more and more people, particularly, on obviously just on the GOP side. So you can bet in those markets. And, as I've explained before, one of the things I do is just pretty much bet no on everyone. And, if you can get that no price at a particular level, then you can end up where there's really no way you can lose. So yeah, although I do think that Noam is probably going to be the VP, or I've been saying that anyhow.
So this is Kristi Noem, who is the governor of South Dakota.
That's right. That's right. And just in my own reasoning, it's just that she, in my opinion, is the most attractive, and that would be the reason why Trump would choose her. So
right. So you mean physically attractive?
Yes.
So yeah, you've mentioned this on the show, and I think that is a very compelling, angle into Trump's psychology. I mean, there was a sort of an Elise Stefanik bubble, and she seemed to, she was sort of a quote unquote like normal Republican, and then went much more MAGA over the past couple of years.
Right.
But she is, no offense to her, she's more or less an average looking person or politician, whereas Kristi Noem is a more attractive
right. I mean,
person.
this is it's sort of uncomfortable to talk about people's looks, but I think also Trump does this with men too. He's enamored with image, and I think he would want to choose the best looking man as well. I mean, I don't think Mike Pence was a bad looking guy. He was just sort of out of like central casting. He seemed like the perfect type of guy to pick. Yeah,
that's Trump's phrase. He uses repeatedly, is out of central casting, and he likes someone who looks like the movie stereotype of that person would be. So when he chose Rex Tillerson to be Secretary of State, that looked like someone who would play the Secretary of State in the Independence Day sequel or something like that, like just the guy with the big head.
Exactly.
So that does appeal to Trump. But the angle, I think, he would not pick an unattractive woman. I'm sure of it. I think his misogyny, I don't know whether he actually would pick a woman to begin with, because he is such a misogynist, and I think he thinks all women are beneath him. So there's that. But then I think he also he would want to pick someone he can dominate and humiliate the way he did with Mike Pence. So that maybe is a countercurrent, and no one would make sense. But I think that's like the biggest the biggest unknown of for the next couple months is what he will actually do. And
Right. I mean, we should just say that Tim Scott is actually trading slightly ahead of Gnome, on predicted.
Yeah,
So,
Tim Scott would
uh,
make sense to me, I think.
definitely he would want to humiliate, and he certainly feels like he could dominate Tim Scott.
Right. And I
So,
think Trump is more of a misogynist than he is a racist, so that would um maybe there's some people who think he would never pick a black running mate, but I could I think he could do it. And yeah, but as long as he could
yeah.
put himself above the that person was willing to humiliate himself or herself. I can
Yes.
definitely see that happening. Let's see. But okay, so the podcast has evolved into just being more about both current events and sort of going down various rabbit holes. And you have a lot of sort of, well, how would you like niche interests? How would you how would you describe things
Yeah.
that like catch your interest?
I don't know. I tend to, yeah, get on particular topics and be kind of obsessive about them. I mean, I'm sure it's an ADHD thing. And I think on the show at one point, I don't, and I can never remember how I get on these things, but I got very interested in these ancient fish weirs at one point and went very deep into that and trying to find where they are and learn about them.
Yeah, why did
And
I didn't I don't think I'd ever heard that term before you talked about it on the show. What do you want to briefly describe what a
so,
fish weir is?
I mean, a fish weir is just, I mean, they were used in colonial times as well, but they were, before colonization, the Native Americans in the U.S. And this is actually a thing that happened all over the world. It was a way to fish by building a stone sort of dam across a creek or a small river as a way to to funnel fish into a small little area and then trap them. Pretty ingenious. And because it these fish weirs, use stones, a lot of them are still out there. There's still remnants of them, and I think in the Google Earth era, you can find them, and that's was my big obsession when I first started reading about them. I started thinking, oh well, I know where some old Indian villages were in North Carolina. I wonder if I were to just fly along this, New Hope Creek, if I would see anything like that. And sure enough, I did. And then I, looked into it, and it was like, yeah, this is a known weir, um, that's been here a long time.
Yeah, that was very interesting then because members of the podcast audience write in with their own takes on whatever you talk about, so you're learning more about fish weirs and ones that are in various places. And there was one in
Right.
like
No, no.
Taiwan or something, and
Some of the people were upset actually that wrote in. They said you shouldn't be making a map of where these are because
oh, because people would disturb them or something.
because they could. And you know what? That's an excellent point. So, you know, um, so you can just sort of say they're in this area. Be
Right.
careful.
So you a lot of your interests, I think, revolve around like geography and like topography, or maybe cartography, like the combination of these things. Because you also, for a while, you were, what was it? Something with like counties that have the same name, and which ones were the closest to each other, identically named counties in different states. That was a fun one. Like, you guys just go down these absurd sort of things and
Ye-
like treat them very seriously and investigate them. And
Yeah, I don't remember the county ones. And then at one point we got into Google Earth and trying to create these straight lines between like really important
oh yes,
landmarks.
yes, yes, the ley lines. That was an interesting one.
Right.
Like, could
So I was able to draw a line from the White House to, I had to pick a very specific important landmark in Boston, and I think I chose Paul Revere's home. And
yes.
I made the argument that that was the most important thing in Boston because I had to choose that for the other portion of it to
And
work,
then it
which was
intersected the Statue of Liberty. Is that what it was?
no, it intersected with the Empire State Building. So,
Okay, interesting.
and
Uh,
yeah, so I made the argument that it was the three most important buildings in those three particular cities.
mhm.
So
Okay. And what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on why you are interested in these, like, sort of coincidences or or
I,
like discoveries that involve maps
I don't
and
I don't think they mean anything. I just I find geography interesting. I love cities and I love wasting time and playing around on the internet and trying to I mean when I was a kid I had every almanac going back to 1977. Um and I love the almanacs because I'd get them every year and then open them up and immediately go to the tallest buildings section to see. I mean, that's how you found out what was going on. You would flip to Charlotte or Jersey City or whatever, and you would see they've added one. There was no way to know that information
yeah, in the
before.
pre-internet era, yeah, the reference books were like the only way that a curious
Right.
young person could get access to this important information. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about Skylines a little bit. I'm a fan of sort of architecture and skylines and tall buildings as well, and I think I got into this when the World Trade Center was being rebuilt, and there were various like live cams of
Oh,
the
I love
site
that.
and stuff like that. I used to, and I moved away. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I moved away, and it was sort of like a way to check in on what was happening in New York, and just that whole process was fascinating. And yeah, and so you have sort of a a system of, or at least judging like what's a good skyline, what's a bad skyline. And I think you said, is it Charlotte, or which North Carolina city has a very good?
Charlotte's got a very good skyline. I mean, it ranks in the top uh 15 skylines in America, and Charlotte is not one of the top 15 metros. So pound for pound, it does pretty well. I like to look at just who's got the most 150-meter buildings, which is the more or less technical definition of what a skyscraper is agreed upon. It's about 490 feet, 150 meters.
Huh.
And, you can break it down that way, or you can break it down by 100 meters. And then, so you can just see who's got the most, who does the best per capita. Um, how do you measure that? Do you measure that using the city population or the metro population? It's kind of, I mean, like with Jersey City, Jersey City is it's confusing for me to try to measure it because it's so close to New York, and it's in the
Right,
New York it's in the New York City metro of
right.
21 million, but it is technically a separate city, and it does have its own separate skyline. But as it's sort of exploded, I mean, I went and looked at it. I mean, it is blown up, and as it's exploded in past places like North Carolina's own Charlotte skyline, I've decided I want to discount Jersey City because it knocks Charlotte down a peg. And there's other cities like that in Sunny Isles Beach outside of Miami. It has its own skyline and it's really large, but it's like 12 miles from downtown Miami. I can kind of see maybe counting that as a distinct thing, whereas the Jersey City skyline is just a mile across the river.
That's true. So yeah, I lived in Jersey City for 4.5 years now, and it's definitely a different city. Like it's there's five boroughs of New York, and it's not one of them, and it's also in a different state, New Jersey. So it definitely qualifies as its own city. I think it's now the second biggest city in New Jersey after Newark, and is probably going to overtake Newark because the amount of growth and construction here is crazy. And we have the tallest, I think at least we have the two tallest buildings in New Jersey, in Jersey City. One is the Goldman Sachs building that was built around 2003, which is a nice, handsome looking building. I mean, it grew out of the 9/11 attacks, I think, because they wanted to move their headquarters away from Lower Manhattan, but still have access. But
Mhm.
then they ended up mainly staying in Lower Manhattan, and other companies moved in. But then they a very ugly, in my opinion, residential skyscraper was built a couple of years ago, and that's like 15 feet tall or something. And yeah, it's hideous in my opinion. And then there's a lot of other uh, buildings going up that are mainly residential, but Jersey City has an oddity. In addition to being like so close to Lower Manhattan, it has sort of like two downtowns. So there's a new a new like skyscraper growth area around this area called Journal Square, where one of the PATH stations is. That was sort of like the commercial downtown of Jersey City before World War II. And
So now they're starting to build skyscrapers there. See, I didn't even
yes,
know that. I thought they were just all along the water's edge. See, I lived in New York you know, in the late 90s and actually worked down near Wall Street. So I mean, I would see the Jersey skyline and the Jersey City skyline, and there was nothing.
yeah, it was
There
pretty
was,
unimpressive before 25 years ago.
In 2000, I don't think there was really anything, but in then around, yeah, I guess you're right. I didn't even make that connection. I guess it really was right after 9/11 where things started to blow up over there.
Right. And the for a place that is not a large city and is kind of an afterthought, that we now have two separate skylines is strange. And it's a lot of it is related to how relatively difficult or easy it is to build in New York City versus building in New Jersey. And just, a lot of people wanted to move out of New York City during the pandemic, and some of them came to Jersey City, and Jersey City is just absorbing a lot of the population growth that would have moved to New York, if more construction was allowed. So we're sort of like the runoff right now. But yeah, it's a interesting time.
Are you in Jersey City now? Are you still
yes,
there?
I'm here as we speak.
Do you have a view of the Manhattan skyline or of the Jersey City skyline? I guess you could have.
I don't. I'm sort of in this weird neighborhood where that's sort of a brownstone neighborhood.
Okay.
And we actually have the sort of the main commercial street in my little neighborhood points directly at Hudson Yards, the massive project that they built over the train yards in Western Manhattan. So that, and it's, I don't know, sort of futuristic and not particularly aesthetically pleasing, I think. But when I cross the main street, it's like a dead shot that framed those buildings. But if I walk a little bit, I see Lower Manhattan very easily. But so there's sort of like the numerical aspect of this, like total height and related to population and stuff like that. But what about like the aesthetic aspect of a skyline and what makes it go on?
I go back and forth. Sometimes I'm just a complete slave to the numbers, and I just want to know, what's the highest and thickest building or whatever. These little thin buildings, I'm getting okay with them now that there's more of them. These super skinny buildings that are happening in Manhattan. At first, I really hated them, but now that there's more, they don't look as out of place.
Right.
And maybe it's just an acceptance thing. Like, okay, this is what's happening. Billionaires are taking over, and we just need to accept that. But yeah, in terms of skylines and the aesthetics, there's obviously, the architecture of the actual buildings is incredibly important. But I think I look at just the balance of the skyline itself, and does it balance well? Does it taper a certain way, or are a bunch of buildings lined up they could in some cases be too close together, so you don't really get the full effect.
Right.
New York New York City is a hard skyline to interpret at times, because of how huge it is actually.
Right. And now there's essentially two clusters of like tall downtown office building type
Right.
buildings. And then all
you
these
add
ones
Jersey
near
City and
Central
Brooklyn.
Park. Yes. And
Right.
Queens is having a huge residential skyscraper boom as well. Yeah. And you've also talked about, you had a discussion about what is like the best approach, like if you're coming into a city or area to view to view a skyline. And I think Jersey City has a very good argument for being on that list, but it's for viewing the Lower Manhattan skyline, because if you're down at Exchange Place in Jersey City, which is where the path stop is that takes you to the World Trade Center, it's an amazing view of Lower Manhattan, and it's like spread out very sort of in a symmetrical kind of way, and it's much better than the view from Brooklyn, I think, of the opposite side of of Manhattan. So that's another sort of, New Jersey's always in the shadow of New York, and like literally and figuratively, and
Yeah.
that I think we do have the best the best view of.
That's interesting. I'd never really thought about what the best view of was coming into Manhattan again, because a lot of times you're coming in through a tunnel, and
Right.
then all of a sudden you're just there. Uh, but so your argument is that Jersey City is the best way
I
to
mean,
come in.
I don't have like I haven't approached, like the Chicago skyline from multiple angles or something, but I think
Yeah,
if we're talking about the New York skyline, I think
that's the way to
at
go.
least Lower Manhattan, the best is from Jersey City, and you could also take if you take a ferry across the Hudson River, that's a great way to
Ooh, yeah.
see the see the city approaching as you're bobbing up and down in the water. That's a fun thing you can do here. So yeah, I think that might be our claim to fame uh, for now until we get a lot more office buildings. And I don't know if we'll ever really develop a sort of a commercial or financial like downtown center. Like there just was that one Goldman Sachs building, and there really wasn't anything else. And now there's a lot more residential, but we're not going to have uh, a bunch of like mid story like new office buildings built here. That doesn't really make sense. So
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting thing is looking at the stats of Jersey City. So it's got 39 buildings that are 100 meters tall, and that's about the same number as Charlotte. But then when you get into 150 meters, that's where Jersey City is just off the charts. It's got 23 buildings over 150 meters, which is tied with Boston.
huh.
So it's yeah, it ranks number 9 in the US.
Oh, that's
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, tied with Boston in the number of buildings over 150 meters. So it's pretty impressive.
Right. And they're almost all residential, I think, except for the Goldman Sachs one that I mentioned.
Wow.
As far as I know, it's all apartments, and they're mostly clustered, except for this second Journal Square area. They're mostly clustered along the river, so it's from certain angles it looks cool. Other angles it sort of looks like just like Legos or something. Okay, let's talk about something else that is a way that one can waste time looking at your computer, which is Twitter/X, owned by Elon Musk. And I think at various times, both of us have been addicted to this site, and maybe we're trying to move away from it. Uh, Now that Musk has sort of ruined it or close to ruin it, where are you in your Twitter slash
I'm
X life?
I'm still there. I'm still reading. Occasionally I will tweet or post something, but it's pretty much to nobody. I don't know if there's anybody out there who any of my followers. I still have, a number of followers. I just don't know if they're still on Twitter. I don't know if you feel that way as well. It's still a functional site to me, but it is way less functional than it used to be. And many of the favorite people that I followed are gone now, and I don't really know where they went. It's like, people just, suddenly this bar is not cool, and they've all left, but they all didn't necessarily choose one bar to go to.
Right.
So I've got a Blue Sky and a Threads, and I'll sometimes log on to those, but it's like starting all over again.
Yeah, it's a weird sort of like zombie sort of state, or like the ship hasn't capsized, it's sort of bobbing on its side in the ocean, where a lot of people left, and like I wanted to try to be one of those people, and I haven't been able to fully get away. But the thing that well, I took the app off my phone. That was one thing I did to disconnect from it, and that was my New Year's 2023 resolution. So it's been like a year and a half where I
And you
haven't had.
kept it off the whole
I've
time.
kept it off, but
Oh,
I have
nice.
logged in using the browser. But I think it's still better because it's just like another step to not doing it. Like I'm not getting the alerts. I don't have the icon like staring at me. begging me to come in.
Oh, absolutely. I would never if I took it off my phone, I'd never be on it ever.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was good. And the other thing I did that has helped me use it less was I locked my account. And I did that mainly because I was looking for a job and didn't want the first result to be my Twitter account with all of my stupid jokes and online nonsense, to show up. But I realized that it locking the account sort of removed the a lot of the game or competitive aspect that's latent in Twitter, because you can't go viral, you can't get retweeted if you're locked. And so I'm not because it was sort of you got little points if you got retweeted and
Right.
little hits of dopamine. So I've weaned myself off of that, and I found that is more. And I also the other positive thing is that I can't get into fights with strangers if I'm locked,
Yeah.
which I did used to do and was satisfying, but not a a healthy thing to be doing. So
No, I've tried the locked thing too, and it's just like, I'm locked. It's fine. I don't care about going viral. Um, but I do care about commenting on the strangers that are wrong, on the
right,
internet.
yes,
And if you are locked, for people who aren't is familiar with Twitter and you comment, they're not going to see it.
yeah,
So you have to unlock yourself to tell somebody that they're wrong.
right.
And I found myself, I don't really do that in politics, but when it comes to sports and basketball and things like that, during the NCAA tournament, I was, I had to put in my 2 cents. But now that that's over, maybe I can lock it and be okay.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like sports is now the dominant thing that hasn't left the app, because a lot of the political people got disgusted with Musk and left. Whereas the sports, just the things that are trending are more often sports related. And so that seems to stick around. And because I don't care about sports that much, I never got into that. But yeah, if you want to argue with people who are wrong about whatever, Twitter continues to be a great place to find people who are wrong and are willing to argue with you.
It's just such a great place for breaking news and, just getting a feeling of, what everyone is saying.
But less than it used to be, because the blue
Absolutely.
check thing, you really used to be able to follow a breaking news event via Twitter, and you can't do that anymore because of the blue check thing. And now if anything happens, you see a trending topic, you click on it, the first result is spam or junk or something, or a lie about what's happened. So
Right. You have to do so much more work now. And I still follow breaking news, via Twitter, but it's because I have, worked on these lists for such a long time. But yeah, I'm not jumping into anything trending at all. I just want to see what the 100 people that I follow might have to say about it.
Yeah, using lists has long been a way to get around what the algorithm wants to feed you, and to sometimes you follow someone and you don't really want to see what they say, but you follow them for some reason. And if you're looking at lists, you can avoid those people. But even that, a lot of the high quality people left. And yeah, I've just found that if there's a breaking news event, just looking at the New York Times sort of live blog about the event is so much better
I
now
can't do it.
than what Twitter is now.
So may I ask you a question? I know that you're supposed to be asking me questions, but
Sure.
I want to. Do people look down on you that you're still on Twitter? My co-host David is constantly giving me a rough time, saying that I love hanging out with Nazis and
Right.
supporting Elon Musk, which I don't like, but I do recognize that is to some extent what I'm doing. So have you gotten that pressure?
I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I think I put that on myself, maybe because I know now how bad it is, and I do feel bad that I'm contributing to Elon Musk's venture to some extent. But I definitely use it less than I used to, and but yeah, I think it is sort of it's not something to. I mean, if it was ever something to brag about, that's sort of absurd that it was once something to brag about. But I'm no longer whatever pride I had that I assembled, 3,000 followers over 10
Yeah.
years, like
Yeah.
that's long gone. And along with many of the followers, people who my account, I mean, because I locked my account, I'm not getting new followers anymore, but I just see like the numbers going down because people are like deleting their accounts.
Yeah.
In addition to all the people who just stop using it, they haven't posted in a year. So it's much, I think it's much more like, I mean, I've compared it on the show to this before. It's like being an alcoholic and going to the bar, like the neighborhood bar, every night, and you get to hang out with your fellow addicts down at the bar and have a great time. But I'm not I'm not bragging about that fact. And if the neighborhood bar, sort of what I was hoping for was that Musk would destroy the site, and then I wouldn't have the neighborhood bar to go to anymore, and then maybe I could, pursue some other interests instead. So that, like, he sort of happened because the bar doesn't. It's like the bar is now filled with robots that want to send naked pictures of themselves to everyone.
But having the smart experts like people like Dave Karp have said, who I consider, pretty much everything he writes and says.
Former guest, I had him on like 2 years ago.
Okay, he's great, and every idea he has, I feel like I take and end up spinning it as my own on our podcast sometimes. And I mean, do you remember what his feeling was? I think he thinks that, or thought that at some point Musk would destroy it, or that they would run out of money. I don't know if that means that if they run out of money that the site goes away, or does it mean that he has to get rid of it?
I mean, I predicted, I think at the beginning of the year, I said by the end of the year, the site will be called Twitter again, and Elon Musk won't own it. That was sort of a like, putting that prediction out there that probably won't come true. But if it did, I could say I called it. But it wouldn't surprise me because it didn't make money before, and it's not making money now. And all of Musk's wealth is associated very highly with Tesla stock, which has been declining, and he had to borrow all this money. So I think what very likely could happen is that the creditors take control of the company. He blames it on the woke media and or the Jews and says they ruined it. And then, some consortium of banks rebrands it once again as Twitter, and they try running it as like more or less a normal website and see if they could make money, and they'd probably fail once again because it's just not,
you can't
it doesn't
do it.
seem like a real good way to make money on this crazy website. Especially when like TikTok and Instagram and Facebook are much more successful at, getting the advertising or whatever.
So why is Blue Sky in Threads? Why do they think they're going to make money?
I mean, well, Threads, it seems more like a loss leader for Instagram.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point.
And I don't even know how much it takes to run it. And Facebook can afford, or Meta, whatever, can afford to waste some money on that. I mean, Blue Sky, I'm not sure, but it doesn't. I mean, it sort of seems. The strange thing about Twitter was it wasn't invented to be what it became, and the actual like use model is strange and not conducive to an actual profit. So I'm not sure that any possible micro blogging social media network could ever actually be profitable given the way like online advertising works. Like it had social uses. It was very entertaining, but like what stupid companies are spending money on ads that like appear, are like 280 characters long and appear next to like neo-Nazis and crazy people. Like it just
yeah, it seems like it has to fundamentally change and pivot to video or something like that.
Yeah, or just like it could be it was a useful service, and maybe like a nonprofit could run it or something. But if you need human moderation, which it seems like you do, then you have to pay those people, and you start accumulating costs. So
what if Wikipedia bought it and then the wiki editors were the moderators?
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, I mean, or some sort of band of well-meaning people, we're running this thing
Right.
instead of either people who are just trying to make money or sort of crazed ideologue billionaires like Musk. Maybe. I mean, one thing that's weird is like it's weird for it to exist in every possible language, which means you need some form of like moderation or something in every possible language. And
Hmm.
that seems very difficult. And like, how can an American company know what are the particular things that might be offensive to people in India and Pakistan? Like, you would need locals and stuff like that. And so you need like a global cadre of people involved in this thing. It becomes very expensive. So maybe like, in 10 or 20 years, there'll be like distributed nonprofit type things. I guess Macedon was sort of along this idea that there'd be no central authority. But then the problem with that, I guess, was it ended up being like people had to pay for the server space. And then so someone has to pay for that stuff in the end. And Wikipedia is always asking for donations. Like 1 out of 3 times you click on an article, it's asking for $1.
Right. No, it's killing me every time I'm in these Skyline things. It's like, dude, you're here all the time. Give us
So
some money.
yeah, so I just don't know if there's a profit model versus like Instagram or something where you see photos of clothes or food or restaurants or something that you might actually want to pay for. That makes a lot more sense as a like advertising driven social media network. So yeah, I don't know. It's all so strange and stupid. Is what I think.
Well, I would love if we would just go back to, blogging and,
Yes.
RSS feeds and but I don't know if that's possible. I mean, it's sort of like when you get rid of something that you're addicted to, or, if you're an alcoholic and you're going to the bar all the time, you do have to replace it with
Right.
something, or you're going to get extremely depressed. So, that you become, a born again Christian, or you become just like obsessed with exercise. And if Twitter goes away, it's got to be replaced with something for the masses, or are the masses just on their own to figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, like it seems like I actually I've never used TikTok because I'm sort of scared of it. Like I know I have a predilection to becoming addicted to something on social
Uh-huh.
media that's addictive. Um,
It's great. It's
but
great.
I'm scared of getting too sucked in, so I've never downloaded it. But it seems like that is much more entertaining than Twitter is, and just the video aspect makes it more compelling. So maybe people will just move to stuff like that.
Yeah, except I guess at TikTok, they're now saying they'd rather shut it down than sell it.
Right. That is all quite strange, and that's maybe too much to discuss in this
Yeah, yeah,
episode. Yeah.
no, I get it. Yeah, I'm not an expert on any of that, so yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've said this on the show before, but it was strange that Twitter became important, and it was mainly because Donald Trump used it and he became president, which was itself strange. But like, if it had stayed sort of like a place for like weirdos and cranks and funny people to waste time, that would have been good. But it assumed this importance because of Trump, because he would tweet constantly, and and because a bunch of journalists would spend time on there. But it's sort of like it's like a message board or something, or a chat room. Like it's for the average people should not be on it. They should be doing something more productive. So I was sort of hoping after the election, after the 2020 election, like that it would just sort of, the temperature would be lowered and it would become more like a place to joke around and for weirdos to hang out. And then I think that was sort of happening, and then Musk bought it and inserted all new
Yeah.
strange levels of craziness into it. So
I
yeah.
think you're right. I think that was happening. Yeah, it was becoming a little more of a less serious place to yeah. I mean, I can't remember the last time I wrote something serious on Twitter. So,
Yeah, but there,
it's
you see people. There's still people who are fighting the what they see as the good fight, and like those people are still out there. But it just seems like because of the strange set of circumstances of Trump, it was important for someone at the time, but it never should have been, and hopefully will not be again. Would be my hope.
yeah, for us anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk Gen X? But maybe before we wrap up, that was that was actually the original
Yeah.
impetus for this episode. So I did an episode with the writer Sarah Miller, who wrote a piece in the New York Times, and it was sort of a humorous piece about how, that people like to fight between the generations, millennials against boomers and stuff like that. But she said she's a Gen Xer. She said Gen X is the generation that hates itself, and so like happy to put themselves down as younger and older people are insulting them. And you're a member of Gen X, so what do you think about Gen X, either as a
Yeah,
generation or politically or whatever?
I mean, politically, growing up, Gen X in Chapel Hill, it's the University of North Carolina is here. It's a very liberal place, but there were still a lot of Republicans, and even in Chapel Hill, kids. Um, and so I've never really felt that. I've always felt that generation that Gen X politically isn't good. Good, just I really think that Gen X and Boomers are way, way, way more alike than anyone wants to admit to. I just think our experiences um, are. I mean, the millennials and yes, and I know you're an elder millennial, but
Right.
I mean, the world that millennials and Gen Z grew up in is just to me fundamentally different, technology wise than what Gen X and the boomers grew up in
Hmm.
with. So, I mean, my take is that Gen X are boomers, and that, and I agree that that we're not a great generation, and that I don't know. I feel like Sarah, she went back and forth. Like I was confused. I was confused. Her takes on the podcast. I feel like she was sort of arguing all sides.
Hmm.
Um, and was defensive of Gen X. In the end, did she like Gen X?
Yeah, I mean,
I came away thinking she liked it.
I think she liked it in some respects, but also I think she liked the self-critical, like, yes, we suck aspect. I think she thought that was a good aspect of Gen X. Um,
Do millennials not think they suck?
I mean, that's a good question. I maybe it probably depends on the micro generation, and yeah, I'm an elder geriatric millennial, and there definitely was, maybe this is the case for all, you know every age cohort, but there was so much discussion of millennials, and maybe there was just more of it because like the age of online takes and like essays coincided with us like entering the workforce. But it was always like, what millennials think about this, or what this means for millennials, or all the like avocado toast related commentary. And so it felt like we were very, very talked about. Um, and maybe I was certainly sick of people talking about millennials by the time people started talking about Gen Z. And it seems like people talk about Gen Z as much as they talked about millennials. So maybe it's just, this is
Yeah,
like always the way it is.
I think it is always the way. I mean, I think they talked all about Gen X, at least for a couple weeks anyway. I mean, Gen X was a big thing when I was growing up, and people
Right.
talked about it, and they talked about how we sucked. And
I mean,
I
I
think
don't think there was a strong, before the baby boomers, I don't think there was a strong idea of like
no,
generations like this. Like it existed, but it wasn't so in the culture of there being these cohorts.
and I don't think anyone ever said that the baby boomers were bad. I mean, they do now. Maybe the baby boomers are getting, their comeuppance with, um, okay, boomer being
Right.
an insult or something. But I don't know.
I mean, I think one of the things I remember saying to Sarah was like a difference between the stereotype of boomer versus Gen X is like the Gen X is like apathetic and doesn't care, whereas the boomers were like righteous and, you know, felt like they saved the country or, did something very important when they were young, whereas Gen X was like felt like they were left behind or yeah forgotten, or they just said whatever man or something like that. And so so I said something like boomers were better because at least they cared about something, whereas Gen X, it seems like especially now Gen X is as more like Gen X people are now coming into power, One of them is Elon Musk, um, and their their politics seem as bad as the like bad boomer politics of George W. Bush and Newt Gingrich and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, how does that strike you?
I agree. I don't. No, I mean, yeah, all the political figures in Gen X, you got Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson's probably Gen
Oh
X,
yeah, it definitely is. Yeah,
and Elon Musk, and there's got to be somebody good.
right. I mean,
I mean,
Kamala.
Obama felt Gen X, but he wasn't. Yeah, okay.
Right, Obama was this
Kamala Harris. I mean, if
case.
that's your flagship, if that's
well, she's
that's
certainly the most prominent. Although, actually, could she count as a? I think she is Gen X, but yeah, I mean, well, she was born in '64, which is.
no, she's not a Gen X.
I mean, it depends. The dividing line is sometimes 64, sometimes 65, and I think Obama was born in '63 or maybe '62. But then, I mean, it also like so much of this is dominated by white people, and
Oh yeah,
if you're not,
no,
and the stereotypes are mostly about like white suburban, like white people who grew up in the suburbs. So if you're not that, then these like stereotypes apply even less than they would.
no, and that's an excellent point, and that's annoying, and you see that in politics too when people are talking about Southerners, and when they're talking about Southerners, they're talking about white people,
Right.
and it's just like there's millions of non-white Southerners, and but I think that's this what the media thinks of, and yeah, maybe I'm guilty of doing that with Gen X, just thinking of white people
Right.
because the dominant media of the time were these films were white people, I guess. I don't know, but I mean, you had like Spike Lee. Spike Lee, is he Gen X?
I think he would have to be, right?
He was certainly making movies for Gen X.
Right. No, he's older than I thought he was. He's 67. He was born in 1957.
Oh
Yeah, I
my
mean
God.
that's another aspect of it is that like John Hughes was a boomer,
Right.
made the movies and pop culture that was consumed by people who were teenagers in the 80s. So yeah, there's this weird sort of like lag with like pop culture and stuff. But yeah, well, I guess Spike Lee is looking pretty good for 67. And may he, continue for many more years. Yeah,
Yeah.
Obama was born in 61, so he's definitely, by any account, is a generationally boomer, but he pitched himself as like turning the generational page on the boomers. And he explicitly said at one point, like the college debates of the 60s, like it's time to move past those. And then, no one, and then the next two presidents after him were both significantly older than him. So like we're still stuck with like those, although Biden himself is not a boomer. Trump is a
He's
boomer.
silent generation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we're even like, and the silent generation is mostly the parents of Gen X.
Yeah.
So we're still, yeah, all these people are not going away as maybe they would have 50 years ago. So there's that as well. But yeah, it does seem like there's definitely like a reactionary element in Gen X politics. And I mean, it's people who mostly grew up during late Carter and Reagan, and that was a very conservative time in the country. So that aspect of it isn't, I guess,
And I feel like
surprising.
they're the Gen X people were the modern culture warriors. I mean, it just that they ushered in that type of politics. You disagree with that?
I'd have to think about that. I mean,
I don't. Yeah, I mean,
they're definitely
Rush Limbaugh.
driving.
That's when Rush Limbaugh became popular.
Mhm.
When Gen X were in high school and college, and just a lot of right wing radio became really popular at that point. And yeah, and they themselves weren't Gen X, but I think they had a major influence on Gen X politically, at least on the right.
Right. And a lot of the like the current iteration of the culture war, a lot of it is about like children and teenagers and college students, and those people, mostly their parents are Gen Xers. I guess the younger ones, their parents might be millennials, but all the like stuff about like the backlash to uh, trans, medicine for trans children, and
Right.
stuff about how race is being taught in like elementary and middle school, like that seems like angry parents.
Of Gen
Well,
Xers.
the parents are
Um,
Gen Xers, the kids
the,
are like Gen Z or
right.
younger,
So see,
and
Gen X is bad. I think. I mean, I think all generations are bad. Um, okay, that's my hot take. All generations are bad.
right, and it is extremely reductive talking about it in these ways. And yeah, it's contingent on other biographical factors and where you grew up and your socioeconomic class and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so but I mean I think Gen X is like the next president is likely to be a Gen Xer, I would think. Um, it might be
Mm,
Kamala, or it might be Kristi Noem or Tim Scott or someone. I mean, next president after Biden and Trump finally leave the scene. Um, so I think a Gen Xer will assume power in the country at some point. Like
briefly.
I don't think Pete Buttigieg is going to win in 2028, but maybe he's a very talented young man.
Why don't you
So
think he'll win in 2028?
I
You
think
don't.
I'm not sure he's as talented enough to pull that off, but maybe he could. I know you, at least on the show for a while, you were a
I
booster of.
am. I think he's so. Yeah. I mean, yeah. This is not what people like to hear because it's very cool to hate on Pete
Right.
Buttigieg, but I just think he's just such a smooth communicator, and he just seems he seems really smart to me. I don't know. I I I could see. I mean, obviously, him being gay is not going to help him with a certain segment of the population. But by 2028, is that going to be a big deal anymore?
Right. I mean, he seems like a very ambitious person, and so it's somewhat surprising that he took the Department of Transportation position, because I thought at the time like that's a position where it's more like if there's some big event, it's more likely to be like something bad happening than something good happening, because
Yeah,
it's not like he's gonna like cut the ribbon on the high speed like Los Angeles to New York train or anything. Like
that's
it's
not
most
happening.
well, not during his tenure at least.
Right, right.
Whereas like he gets blamed for things like if the computer system that powers the FAA or something goes down, then people are mad at him or something, or trying to blame him for the uh the boat crashing into the bridge in Baltimore. So anyway, it sort of seemed like a non-flashy role that a very ambitious politician would not take, but he took it anyway. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this best that was out there. What were you thought that maybe he would then just like try to run for Senate or something
Yeah,
instead of do that?
I don't. I mean, I don't know. I guess he, because he's from Indiana, his maybe that was the best he could possibly do. But he could
Right.
have just like taught at Harvard or something like that for a couple of years if he wanted to just like cool his jets, and or start a nonprofit foundation or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like it's a job where mainly people are like, who should I blame for this? That Pete Buttigieg, he screwed it up. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's a good point. But I mean, I guess going into, the Senate, you get senators are notoriously blamed for a lot of things too. But yeah, teaching, oh, I don't know, maybe they could blame the whole thing that's happening on campus if he went into teaching.
Right. I mean, maybe he could be the next president of Harvard University, perhaps.
Hmm.
He's a graduate, and the previous president got forced out. So that would be the first millennial Ivy League president would be an impressive, uh, um, a resume item for him. So maybe that'll happen.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Okay, we've gone pretty long. Is there anything else
Okay.
you want to mention before we wrap up?
No, no. I really appreciate you having me. It's nice to finally meet you.
Well,
After I feel like we've been going back and forth on Twitter, for years. Not seriously, but just
yeah, I mainly chime in with jokey stuff on Twitter, but yeah, and so if people are still listening to this and they have not yet been convinced to check out your show, they should check it out. It's very funny. I as soon as it pops up on my podcast feed every week, I listen to it because I know you're talking about stuff that happened that past week. And you and David have a great rapport where you're sort of like, I think when I talked to David, I sort of described you as the straight man and him as the more like outlandish like persona, but you sort of go back and forth in your like which way like who's being more the straight man and who's going more in like the unusual
right.
direction.
But I think that's fair. I think I'm mostly the straight man. I mean,
I think,
David's pretty wild.
yeah, in affect, you're much more the straight man, and he,
Okay.
he'll break into like improvised song and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you have your own, like I said, like cul-de-sacs that you go down into. But yeah, it's a funny show, and
Well, thank you.
I
Thank
enjoy
you.
listening to it.
Yeah. Thanks a
Um,
lot. I really appreciate you listening and having me on today.
Okay, well a link to the Election Profit Makers feed will be in the show notes, and I guess a link to your Twitter, which you're probably will still be on when this episode releases, will be in the show notes as well. Is there anything else you want to plug or mention or anything like that?
I can't think of anything. No.
Okay, well, thanks for coming on, and thanks to all of the listeners out there who can rate and review and tell their friends and so on and so forth. And we'll see you again next time.